Okay, so for the past few weeks we've been discussing the topic of Wtntu the Mashiach to understand a little bit of what our generation is going through, to understand what are the characteristics of our generation, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and so on. So there's one aspect that I want to discuss today, one small point, which is that, you know, a couple of weeks ago we discussed the concept that despite the fact that the world looks crazier than it's ever been, the collective level of religiosity, the collective level of even within those that are religious, of their commitment to Torah mitzvahs, of their strength, of their knowledge of Torah mitzvahs and so on, is very, very deficient as compared to previous generations. So we talked about a couple of weeks ago how that's not necessarily a sign of any deficiency in the depths of the neshama. If anything, it's the opposite. Hashem Dafka sent the strongest neshamas to deal with this level of darkness. But what I want to discuss today is what exactly is the benefit of having a world that has such darkness in it. And once there is darkness in the world, then it's true. Then Hashem has no choice, so to speak, but to send very, very extraordinarily strong neshamas to deal with that darkness. What exactly is the purpose? What's the benefit, as far as Hashem is concerned, of creating a world and creating a society in such a way where there's an unbelievable darkness, unbelievable Hester Pana? What exactly is the benefit of that? So this is a concept that I want to discuss for a few minutes from the Ramchal. The Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, one of the greatest Mekubalim of all time. So he wrote a sefer called Das Tvunos, the knowing heart, the way it's translated. Das Tvunos. In Das Tvunos, he discusses many, many things, but one of the main themes that he discusses is the following concept. He says the following thing. He says, why did Hashem create the world to begin with? You know, obviously that's a very, very loaded question, why Hashem created the world. And ultimately speaking, it's very difficult for human mind to comprehend why Hashem created the world. But says the Ramchal the following thing. He says, the purpose of creation was in order for Hashem to reveal a certain aspect of himself. There's a certain part of himself, of Hashem, that obviously is always remains hidden, always remains unknowable and unfathomable. But there's a certain aspect of himself that he wants us to know about, that he wants us to appreciate, wants us to connect to think about, to feel associated to. There's a certain aspect of his presence as that. So Esther Ramchal, what quality, what midah, what characteristic, so to speak, of Hashem is the most important, so to speak, is the driving force of why Hashem started this whole thing called creation to begin with. So says the Ramchal, there's many aspects of Hashem's presence. Hashem is considered, we call Hashem a Gibar, we call Hashem strong, we call Hashem awesome and Nora. All these different character traits. What is the one character trait which is the purpose of creation for us to recognize and for us to connect to and for us to see in Hashem? So it says the Ramchal, it can't be, for example, it can't be Hashem's strength. Why? This is because as great as the universe is, you know, we all see Hashem's strength whenever, you know, there's lightning and thunder outside. We see Hashem's strength when the Jewish people are able to fight wars and have victories over our enemies. We see Hashem's strength. However, says Ramchal, ultimately speaking, that's not the limit of Hashem's strength. At the end of the day, the strength that we see as revealed in nature is limited to nature. And it can't be, Hashem can't reveal the strength that he has within him, so to speak, beyond the limits of nature, because we live in a world of nature. So clearly, says Ramchal, it can't be the strength of Hashem that is the character trait that motivated the creation of the world to begin with, because that character trait is never really going to be fully revealed within the world. And so too, says Ramchal, he goes on from character trait to character trait. It can't be Hashem's strength. It can't be it can't even be Hashem's wisdom, because again, if the purpose of creation was for us to appreciate his wisdom, then to create a finite world with human beings with a finite level of intellect, there's a certain ceiling on how much we could appreciate of Hashem's wisdom. And therefore it's not logical, it's not sensible that the whole purpose of creation should be for us to appreciate his wisdom if our ability to appreciate that wisdom is itself limited. And he goes on from character trait to character trait. Says the Ramchal, however, there is one midah, there is one aspect of Hashem, there is one character trait of Hashem, which is fully revealed fully revealed through the physical world. And that is the unity of Hashem, the Achdus of Hashem. We say every day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Says Ramchal, the one aspect, the one character trait, the one part of himself that he wants, that he wishes to reveal, which is fully appreciated, Dafka through this world, is the fact that Hashem is one. Now, what does it mean Hashem is one? So, on a very, very simple level, we ask a kid asks, what is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem? Yeah, there's only one God, as opposed to there being many gods. But as we get older and we grow, hopefully, we begin to realize that Hashem Echad means more than just as opposed to two or three. Hashem Echad, as Ramchal explains, means that Hashem's light and Hashem's providence and Hashem's hand and His presence is able to incorporate all things, even those things that seem the opposite to Him. The Ramchal explains that the oneness of Hashem is davka revealed through its opposite. Through Hashem creating a world with so many millions and billions and trillions of different parts, of contradictory elements, of events in nature, of events in human history that seem opposed to Hashem, that seem the opposite of Hashem being involved in life, it's davka through that when Mashiach comes, it will be revealed how all of that which seemed to be the opposite of Hashem's oneness is part of Hashem's oneness. And the Ramchal explains, if Hashem were to create the world in such a way where everything was good, if Hashem only had angels, so to speak, and everything was positive, everything was light, and there was no darkness at all in life, then says Ramchal, there will be a level of Hashem's oneness which we would never be able to appreciate. Because the oneness of Hashem, the fact that Hashem is able to bring together and is able to encompass all things, is only truly appreciated and manifested when we see what seems to be the opposite of Hashem. When we live a life and we have a world around us which seems to be the opposite of Hashem's light, and davka in such a place Hashem comes and reveals that all that darkness and all that difficulty was part of His world, it was part of His presence, and His arms, so to speak, encompassed and hugged all of that darkness. It's davka then that the Hashem's oneness is truly revealed. So as opposed to every other character trait, as opposed to His strength or His wisdom or His ability to perform miracles and so on, they are limited by the world. The oneness of Hashem is not limited by the world, it's the opposite. It's actually revealed in the world. Now the problem is that oneness of Hashem is never, through the opposite of the oneness of, through the opposite of what seems to be the darkness of reality. While we're in the darkness, it's very difficult to manage. But when Mashiach does come, the purpose of that the purpose of all creation will be revealed, in that it will be shown that all the darkness and all the difficulties that the Jewish people and the Jewish person have gone through was all part of revealing the oneness of Hashem, and how Hashem was one, and how Hashem was involved in every single detail of that reality, and then that which looked as darkness, that which looked as the opposite of Hashem's oneness, was in fact part of Hashem's oneness. And therefore, says the Ramchal, before Mashiach comes, Dafka Hashem will send the most difficult nisyonos, the most difficult tests, and the thickest darkness, in order to enhance the revelation of oneness that will take place when Mashiach does come. Because again, if the world is generally good and everything is okay, there's a certain limit to how much of Hashem's oneness is revealed in that, is manifested in that, because everything is one. It's dafka through its opposite. It's dafka through the darkness of a person's life and the darkness of Jewish history and the darkness that we find ourselves in today. It's dafka, and despite all that darkness, Mashiach will come, and it will be revealed that all that was part of Hashem's master plan, that specifically is the way to reveal the great oneness of Hashem, more so than can be revealed if everything would have been good and everything would have been light from the beginning. So explains the Ramchal, the whole purpose of creation is to reveal Hashem's oneness, and therefore the world is in such a way where Hashem will dafka send darkness. Hashem dafka sends difficulty into a person's life and into the Jewish life in general as we get closer and closer to Mashiach, in order to set the stage for Mashiach to come and to reveal the unbelievable Hashem Echad that exists in reality, that's able to encompass even the darkest of places. And that's what it means when we say that Mashiach comes, but Yomahu Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad, that Hashem will be one, His name will be one. The meaning of that is that itself is the purpose of creation. It will become clear that every single step along the way and every single difficulty every single one of us had to go through was not void of Hashem's presence, the opposite. Hashem was directing us in that dark place. This is hinted to in a pasuk. The pasuk says, Ki shemesh umagin Hashem Elokim, that Hashem is somehow compared to the sun and its sheath. We know that according to Chazal, that whatever this means, the sun is an unbearable ball of fire and light. And Hashem therefore has to cover it up with some sort of covering to allow the world to exist. And what the pasuk is saying is that Hashem also involves himself in the world in such a way. That oneness of Hashem is so unbelievably huge. Hashem created a system in such a way where the world seems to be the opposite of that oneness. But then when Mashiach comes, that oneness will be unbelievably expressed through its opposite. So this is why Hashem is putting us in such difficult times. It's not to punish us, and it's not because of our deficiencies. It's the opposite. Hashem is setting up the stage for Mashiach to come and to reveal the unbelievable hashgacha, the unbelievable providence, the unbelievable love that Hashem that does exist in all these dark places. And that love and that oneness of Hashem would not have been able to be manifested and would not have been able to be revealed in the way that it could be revealed if the world would not have to go through such darkness. It's dafka through the darkness that the oneness of Hashem will be revealed. Okay, so that's maybe just to finish off the Indian of the Ikus of the Mashiach, to appreciate that what we're going through is not as difficult as it might be. It's not because of anyone's deficiencies, and it's not our fault. It's something that we have to go through, and ultimately speaking, it will be for our benefit. It will be the world, the oneness of Hashem will be jumping off the page all the more so because of all the difficulties that we're going through now.
Okay, so we got one question. You hear me?
Yeah.
Is it all for the purpose of contrast? If so, how does that turn to light? It's hard to understand how the evil bad is really good if it's just to see the good. If it's just to see that the good is so good, that doesn't really make the bad the good.
Okay, so it's 100% true. The concept of evil is a very, very deep Indian. Where does evil come from? Because if ultimately everything is coming from Hashem, and as we've been talking about, when Mashiach comes, it will be revealed that the oneness of Hashem encompasses all things, even that which seems to be the opposite of Him. So where is there room for evil? So the truth is that as one learns the Svarim, it becomes more and more clear that there's no question evil does exist. Evil does exist. However, in the root of things, the source of evil, where evil ultimately stems from, is ultimately rooted back in Hashem, and there's no question about it. Even the Satan, even Satan, the Malach HaMavis and so on, they're malachim, and at the end of the day, they have their root in holiness, in kedusha. The evil that we see with our eyes, which we're hoping for and we daven for to be obliterated, that is the last vestige, the last manifestation of what began ultimately in Shemayim as something which has its roots in holiness. It's the last manifestation, the last shadow, the last cloud of impurity that we're waiting to be completely taken away from the world, and for what to be revealed as the source where that evil was coming from, which is only kedusha. Now this is an unbelievable thing that we can't. It's difficult to understand with the intellect until it happens. How somehow you could have a world where there's such evil, such difficulty, and somehow the root of all that traces itself back to Hashem. How that works is something that's very, very difficult for the human mind to comprehend. But we do believe that there is something called evil, and there is something called a rasha, and there is something called tumah in the world, which has to be eradicated. Nevertheless, what we do believe, and this is what I'm talking about when Mashiach comes, the oneness of Hashem revealing, is that the root of all that, where that all came from and how that devolves, so to speak, in reality, ultimately comes from Hashem. And because it ultimately comes from Hashem, therefore Hashem's involvement in those evil events and in those evil places was never fully taken away. So despite the fact that evil does exist, tumah, impurity does exist, and we're hoping for that to be completely eradicated, because the root of evil, where it ultimately comes from in heaven, is coming from a place of holiness, and Hashem is the life-giving force of all things. Because of that, Hashem never is fully removed from all the happenings of this world, even the most dark and the most disgusting. Hashem is always involved in that, and there's a tragedy in that. There's a certain exile that Hashem is put in because of the evil that exists in the world. But ultimately speaking, Amunah of a Jew, of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, means that a person, as the Baal Shem Tov said, that a person that believes in Hashem Echad is able to look evil in the eye and to recognize that the outer shell of what's happening has to be eradicated, but the inner soul, the inner dimension of where this is coming from, ultimately traces its roots back to Hashem. Now, what does this mean? On a Kabbalistic level, it's very, very difficult to talk about, but what it means practically for us is that when a person is confronted by evil, we have to do everything we can to eradicate that which is negative, to connect to that which is positive. But when a person is confronted by evil, Amunah means, Jewish faith means, to believe in Hashem Echad means that ultimately, somehow, some way, this is ultimately connected back to Hashem. And even though the way this is being manifested right now is in a negative way, the source of all things, which is Hashem, is somehow yet involved. And He's still involved in my life, even in this dark place. And that gives a Jew hope to be able to be taken out of such a thing. If a Jew doesn't believe in Hashem Echad, then it's very difficult for a person to pick himself out of impurities that he might have fallen into. But once a Jew believes that Hashem Echad, that ultimately everything traces roots back to that oneness, that when Mashiach comes, that oneness will be fully revealed, then ultimately there's no place on earth and there's no corner in my life that's completely void of his presence, or at least his providence. And that gives a Jew hope, and that gives a Jew chizuk even through the darkest of times. And Hashem, what I'm saying is that Hashem allows sometimes for these darknesses to evolve, for these darknesses to cover the face of the earth, sometimes only for the revelation of that oneness of Hashem to be even more, jumping off the page when Mashiach does come. So I hope that explains a little bit of what I'm talking about. Again, I know it's difficult concepts, but maybe a little bit of an explanation of what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I just unmuted everybody. If anybody has a question, please jump in. Any other questions? No.
Okay.
Okay. Also, everyone, before we just stop, if you can please email me any topics that you'd like to see discussed. We're looking to move on to other topics, so Yossi wants everybody's suggestions. So if you can email me any ideas that you have, and we'll try to pick some that keep everybody interested. All right.
Bye.